Hello Agency Life students, making this film for you so that you've got some idea of the assessments that you've got to look at in the next few months. There's only a few weeks now before you start handing work in again, and it's important that you understand the things that you're going to do and how they're going to be affected by the work that you're doing with your employers. So I'm going to deal with each of the assignments that you've got to deal with over the next few weeks and give you some ideas and hints about what we're expecting to see them, how we'll mark them, and so on. First thing I'd like to say to you all is it's really important that you've got a copy of the assignment and that you've read it through really clearly. One of the biggest criticisms of students is that they don't read the assignment carefully, that they don't read it to the end, and that they don't necessarily understand all of the things in it. So if you've watched this film today, if there are things that you don't understand, it's very important that you get in touch with us, and there are plenty of ways of doing that. You know we have our Agency Life surgeries on Wednesday, and I'm very aware that many of you are working with your employers on those days. But we have the forums inside Moodle, and they tend to be very quiet, but they're a great place to ask questions and get a reasonable answer. The thing that we're also going to be doing over the next few weeks is trying to organise a Google Hangout on Wednesday so that you can log into the Hangout from anywhere and ask questions and talk to us face to face. We'll see how it goes with the first few attempts, and if it's a thing that works, then we'll carry on doing it until the end of term. I've sent an email to all of your Agency Life employers, so every employer now knows when the programme is meant to finish. Some employers will be making very specific operational decisions about when they want your last week to be at work. It's also important that you talk about your assignment with your Agency Life employers. All of the employers are aware that you have an assignment to do for this programme, and they're very conscious that the content of your assignments is affected by how well you do at work and the kinds of things that you've been doing. So let's have a look at all of these different things and see which are the things that are going to cause you trouble and where you might find little hiccups. So the first thing you've got to think about is your final reflection document. Now, 25% of your whole module grade comes from this document, so it's important that you do this well. And in this particular document, you're going to be talking about something that you've experienced since the beginning of September. Now, I've been asking you all to keep a learning log, and many of you have been keeping these on blogging platforms, and this is great. One of the things that we did notice with a number of students in the last assignment is that you suddenly realised at the last minute that really you should have been keeping a learning log. And so there were a lot of people who just knocked together something really quickly, and it was a bit quick and dirty for our liking, in order to satisfy the requirements of the assignment. Now, the learning log's really important because we have all got bad memories and we don't remember everything that happens to us. And if you keep a record of everything that happens each week, it's a really useful thing for you to refer back to later on. So I know it's boring, I know you think, I don't really want to do this, but you'll find it'll make writing the assignment easier. So even if you haven't started already, think about starting today. And I don't mind or care how you keep a log of things that happen, whether you do that with blogging software, which means that you can access it from any device that you've got, or whether you keep a little notebook, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you keep video logs or audio logs or written logs, as long as you're recording things that happen. Now, there's no reason why any of you shouldn't be keeping a record of what's happening, because everyone is experiencing different things every week. Some of those things are good, some of those things are less good, some of them are very positive things, and some of them are things where maybe things haven't turned out quite right. And that's fine, because what we're interested in is you referring to those occasions and learning from them. That's what we want you to do. So if you have a listen to what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes, it might make you understand why keeping a log is so important. One of the things that you need to do is produce evidence of keeping that log. We don't mark it, but we need to see evidence of it being kept. So as part of the requirement for this final piece of work, you have to show that you've been keeping, you have to provide evidence that you've been keeping a log ever since you've started the program, and that there should be at least one entry per month, which means we're probably looking for a minimum of 6 entries to be attached to your final submission. Now, it's up to you whether you do that on the night before you hand this work in, but it's not going to look particularly good or clever, and it's not going to be very interesting, and you're going to find it a bit of a pain in the bum to do. So think about doing it. It only takes a couple of minutes every week or a few more minutes every month, but really you should be doing this as a matter of course, and your employers know that you're supposed to be keeping a log, and they regard it as good practice. Now, this final reflection document is a very short piece of work, and really what you're trying to do is talk about the impact that your PDR had on your second term. Now, PDRs, as we know, are all about discovering something about yourself and finding out what you should do in order to improve yourself. So many of you wrote in your PDRs that you realised that maybe you weren't good at a particular thing. Maybe you weren't particularly good at a certain activity, or maybe you had a certain attitudinal problem, or maybe there was an issue with behaviour. And you had to identify some kind of thing that would allow you to improve either on your attitude or your behaviour or a particular competence. So what we're doing with our individual submission here is you've got to find a moment when you realised that you were conscious of your own poor performance or your own excellence. So think of a time, and it can be any time from September onwards, but it's possible to talk about things from this term too. Think of a time when you really screwed up or you did something really well. What was that thing? Well, how did you blow it? What did you do? Did you blow it in terms of performance? Did you think you had the capability and the talent to do something, but you didn't, and as a result, maybe you made a mess of something? Or maybe there was an attitude problem, and that's caused maybe friction. Maybe there's something about your behaviour that's caused friction or dissent. Maybe you've rubbed the employer the wrong way. Maybe something happened between the lot of you and there was an incident. We don't mind that there's been a problem. What we're interested in is, do you recognise it? And if you do recognise it, what has it made you feel? What have you done about it? So have a look in your learning log, whether it's a blog site driven one, or whether it's one that you're writing by hand, or your video log or something like that. And look at a particular event that's occurred. And what we're interested in doing is finding out how you dealt with it. If it was a piece of excellent performance, what made it so good? Why do you think you were such an excellent worker? You know, if you were able to succeed where perhaps other people might have failed, why do you suppose that is? What are the causes for it? What are the things that made that happen? So you need to identify something from the log that you're keeping, and you need to discuss it. You need to think of the reasons why it occurred. You need to reflect on it. It's a reflective document. One of the things that it's hard for you to do is accept that things might be your fault, and actually accepting that you may have caused things is an important part of growing up and becoming a professional. Maybe you realised that you weren't at fault, but other people that you work with were at fault. Was your instinct to sort of suddenly start blaming people, or did you start thinking, hang on, let's try and find a way out of this problem? So don't think of this as a kind of opportunity to point and call names and things like that. This is an opportunity to think about you and your role in all of these things. And one of the things that makes us professional is whether we can realise that when it's our fault that something's occurred, or whether we're grown up enough to realise that other people can be causes of the problems that we have, but we know what to do about them. We know we're the person that can take control. We're the person that can move. So you do need to discuss carefully that particular thing. Think about something where there was an opportunity maybe and you were given this opportunity, did you succeed or did you fail? And can you think of the reasons why you succeeded or the reasons why you failed at it? What were the causes? What were the issues and risks associated with you taking on something or doing something? Did you know what you were doing? Were you taking a big risk, and as a result, did it pay off or not? So really, we're trying to look at whether you know something's occurred and whether you knew what to do about it. The other thing you've got to do is look at the KPIs that you've had from your PDR, and really you just need to cut and paste the original KPIs from your PDR. You need to show us one very specific KPI, I think is a good way of doing it, because you've only got 2 pages. Make sure that your original PDR is in the appendices so that we can refer back to it if we need to. But what you have to do is show how you've met the KPIs that you set yourself. How have you done? They're measures of performance. How have you met them? And you need to show us evidence of meeting your KPIs. Remember, KPIs are key performance indicators. They're things we use to measure whether we've been successful or not. And we set them up in advance. Then we go through whatever we're supposed to do, and then we see whether we've met our target. So what little target did you set yourself in your PDR as a result of doing your professional development? And can you show us how you've met that target? So this should be a fairly simple exercise. Have a look at the grading criteria. They're the ones that look like this. It's the ones in the landscape fashion. Look in there, because that shows you how you'll be marked for this particular part of the assignment. It shows you what you've got to do. It shows you what you've got to put in to the final reflection document. And you'll see that there are 5 different criteria that are used to mark your work, and they're all equally weighted. So make sure that you do all of those things. Think of it as a tick list. Look at the submission to checklist on page 9 of the assignment, and that will show you what you have to do. You've also got to attach your individual employer engagement form for term 2 to this. So make sure that when you're submitting your work, you're submitting the final reflection document and the employer engagement form together. Put the employer engagement form on the top. That means it's the first thing we see, and that's dead easy to handle. Make sure that you do attach your original PDR, the 2-sided thing, that's all we need, we don't need anything else, to your final reflective piece, so that when we're reading your final reflective piece, we can refer back to that. Look in the grading criteria. You actually get a mark for attaching the original PDR to your final reflective piece. I mean, that's the easiest 20% you're ever going to get in an assignment, so don't forget to do that. Now let's have a look at some of the other things you've got to do. You've got to create a work outputs movie. So this is something you're going to have to do as a team. And I would start thinking about this now. You've all got phones with cameras on. Start filming the work that you're doing. The film's going to be 5 minutes long, and the point of the film is to show us and employers what you've been doing this year. So you need to film the work that you've been doing. So have you been working on a project? Have you been working on regular tasks at the agency? What is it that you've been doing? Everyone in your team has to be in the film. So if you're a team of 6, that means that 6 people have to be in the film. That means you've only got a few seconds each. Make sure that when you're filming that you're conscious of 1 or 2 things. One is that there's audio. You're either going to have to do a voiceover of the film, or you're going to use the audio you're recording at the time of filming all of the bits. It means you need to get into the idea of editing a piece of film. You should be able to do this because there's lots of free software to do it. So on Macs you've got obviously iMovie. On Windows machines you've got Windows Movie Maker. You can use either of these pieces of software. Very easy to use. Don't need any training to cut down your film. Remember, it's a 5-minute movie. So that's the first thing that you've got to be conscious of. No longer. Anything longer won't get watched. So make sure it's 5 minutes max. Make sure everyone's on the film. Make sure that there is a voiceover that is explaining what's going on. Make sure then that you host your video on a free public video hosting service. And what we suggest you do is use YouTube or Vimeo because they're the most reliable and the ones that you're most familiar with. Remember, when you're making your film, to be careful about what you're saying about your employer and products and clients and so on. It's probably going to be very sensible that you okay the contents of your film before you upload it. You need to be very cautious about the things that you're saying because you might be saying things that aren't to be talked about. When you've put the film up on YouTube or on Vimeo or whichever service you want to use, make sure that you link the film in the forum that's on Moodle that we've set aside for it. It will be really obvious, and what you have to do is create a post or a reply in that forum, put the link in. Make sure you put everyone's names in the post so that we can see all of the people who are in the film. Make sure you tag up the video on YouTube or Vimeo with people's names, with the name of the course, maybe with the name of the company, so that it gets recognition, so that it can be found easily by other people, because this is a great thing for you to use as part of your future employability. The other thing that's going to happen is your employers are going to mark you, and you'll be aware of this already, but there is an employee and work quality assessment form. And one of the things we've asked all the employers to do is not necessarily mark you as a team, but mark you as individuals where that is appropriate. So make sure that you hand the employer assessment form to your employer and that they fill it in and sign it and hand it back to you. Remember that the work quality assessment form is worth 20% of your grade. So it's important that this is going to be a reflection of two things. One is the quality of the work that you have produced. Now, we've been saying to employers, think about this at the point that the student leaves the organisation. What's the quality of their work when they've finished? You don't start off brilliantly, you start off okay, and then you gradually get better. So we're asking them to mark it from that perspective. The second thing is we want them to make an assessment of your professionalism. Now, each employer is going to make a judgment about your professionalism. And that's something that you've got to bear in mind. That's going to be based on all sorts of things. Your attitudes, your behaviour, and your competence. All of those three things they'll be thinking of. So make sure that your employer fills in the form for you. Find out whether it's their intention to mark it as a group form or as an individual form. I think most of them are going to give each of you an individual form. Make sure that you submit that through the blue box. There's information in the assignment about this, so make sure that you do that. And finally, the work outputs movie is a group piece of work. You may also find that your employer decides to give your team the work and employee quality assessment form rather than you as an individual. Either way, you need to use our peer assessment form to decide how the marks should be divvied up in your team. Now, I'm expecting that almost all of you will be simply saying, we all contributed 100% to this, so we should all get equal marks. But some of you might disagree about that. Some of you might be very conscious of the fact that you haven't contributed very much, or that you have contributed more in order to cope with someone else. Your team needs to meet to decide that. You can ask for our help by coming to one of the agency life surgeries, or you can talk to your employer about how you should allocate those marks. But we'll be putting up the peer assessment form on Moodle, and everyone in your team will need to make sure that they agree to what's being filled in. It's part of professionalism to understand how much you've contributed to a particular piece of work. So make sure that you all agree with the marks that you think should be awarded to each other, and make sure that that form comes through the blue bin system. There are really clear instructions about how we want you to submit everything, so make sure you do hand in things as they're described in the assignment. Make sure you read this very carefully. I know it looks very long, and I know you're thinking, I'd rather not read it. But if you read it carefully, the instructions are simple if you follow them to the letter. Okay, if we have any interesting questions over the next few weeks, we'll probably make another film. Otherwise, we'll start giving you information about Google Hangouts that we're going to launch. All you need to do is have a Google Plus account and a machine that's possible to use using Google Hangout. I know many of you already use Google Hangouts with your employer, so this is going to be nothing new to you. If you don't use Google Hangout, I'd suggest that you start exploring it now, because it's a very easy tool to use. It's free, and all you need is a Google account, which almost everyone on the planet has. Otherwise, we look forward to your questions on Moodle, on the appropriate forums, and look forward to seeing many of you discussing the excellent time that you've had with your employers.